It's just after dark on September 15th, 1944, and a German soldier is lying flat in a tree line north of Bettembourg, Luxembourg, watching another army get ready for a fight. Through his binoculars he counts tanks, dozens of them, tucked into the trees along the ridge. He hears engines. He hears heavy vehicles moving somewhere behind the line, all through the night, the way an armored division moves when it's settling into position. He reports back exactly what any trained soldier would report. The Americans have reinforced this sector. A full armored division is dug in and waiting. He is wrong, not about what he saw, about what it was. Those tanks are rubber. 93 pounds each, carried into position by 2 men and inflated by hand in under 10 minutes. The engine noise is a recording, playing off a truck-mounted speaker hidden in a hedgerow half a mile away. And the division he thinks is here, the one with the tanks, the traffic, the radio chatter moving up and down the line all night, doesn't exist. Not tonight. Not in this place. Its real tanks are more than 100 miles away, fighting somewhere else entirely. What's actually defending this stretch of the front line is just over 1,000 men. Fewer than 200 of them are carrying a weapon heavier than a rifle. This is the story of how they convinced the German army otherwise, and why. For one tense week in Luxembourg, that lie may have mattered more than a real division ever could. To understand why this gamble was even necessary, you have to understand what Patton's army actually looked like that September. His advance across France had gone faster than anyone expected, faster than the supply lines behind it could really support, and that speed had a cost. Divisions were stretched thin across frontages, far wider than any field manual would recommend, and commanders were constantly pulling armor away from quiet sectors to reinforce breakthroughs somewhere else. Near Bettembourg, that shuffling left something dangerous behind, a gap. The division that was supposed to be guarding this stretch of line, the 6th Armored, had been pulled out to help somewhere else. And German patrols, doing exactly what good reconnaissance units do, were already probing this same stretch of ground, testing it, looking for the soft spot that would let an armored counterattack punch straight through and unravel everything Patton had built that summer. There was no spare division sitting around to plug that hole, not a real one. What Patton's staff had instead was something the U.S. Army had never fielded before, and barely knew what to do with, a unit built almost entirely out of artists. They called themselves the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Most of the men in it had been commercial illustrators, window display designers, stage set builders, people who understood, better than almost anyone else in uniform, how to make something fake look completely real from a distance. They'd been training for exactly this kind of moment since January, at a camp in Tennessee, building inflatable tanks and half-tracks and testing them against aerial photography to see if they could fool a trained eye looking down from a few thousand feet. Now, in France, they were about to find out if they could fool an army looking up close, at ground level with everything on the line. There was no second chance built into this plan. If it failed, it wouldn't fail quietly. A German commander who realized the tanks in front of him were made of rubber wouldn't just shrug and move on. He'd push through the gap immediately, with real armor, into a sector that had almost nothing behind it capable of stopping him. Every man in that unit understood in some form that the safest thing they could do was make sure the enemy never had a reason to look twice. Their toolkit had 3 layers, and every layer had to work at the same time, or the whole illusion would fall apart the moment someone noticed a piece that didn't fit. The first layer was visual. Under cover of darkness, teams moved out into the tree lines and began inflating rubber tanks. Half-tracks, artillery pieces, dozens of them, weighted down so a stiff wind wouldn't give the game away, painted with authentic unit markings and even fake battle damage. Because a tank that looked too clean was its own kind of red flag. The second layer you couldn't see at all. You could only hear it. Massive speakers, mounted on trucks and hidden along the tree lines, began playing recordings, tank engines, tracked vehicles grinding over dirt, the sound of an armored division settling into its positions for the night. The recordings had been engineered specifically to carry for miles, timed to match exactly what a real division would sound like, doing exactly this, at exactly this hour. And the third layer was the one that could get them caught fastest if it went wrong, fake radio traffic. Built to mimic, transmission for transmission, the actual communication habits of the division they were impersonating. Same call signs. Same rhythm between battalion and regiment. Even the same sending style individual operators used, because German listening posts were known to track that kind of detail as closely as the words themselves. Meanwhile, a smaller group of genuine combat engineers moved in behind all of it with real bulldozers, cutting tank tracks into the dirt in exactly the pattern a real armored column would leave, manning real checkpoints on the roads leading into the sector, so that anyone who actually drove through, soldier, civilian or spies, would see real uniforms, real security, real proof that something serious was here. None of this could afford a single mistake. A radio net that didn't match the tanks parked nearby. Tank tracks cut in a pattern no real armored column would ever leave. A speaker playing engine noise from a position with nothing visible behind it. Any one of those seams, spotted by the wrong pair of eyes, could have brought the entire structure down in an afternoon. So every layer had to move together, in step, checked and rechecked against the others, because the Germans weren't just looking at one thing. They were cross-checking everything, what they saw, what they heard, what they intercepted, against everything else, the same way anyone would when a division's worth of danger suddenly appears out of nowhere. For a week, the Germans kept looking, and every time they looked, they found exactly what they expected to find. Patrols pushed toward the line and ran into real gunfire from the engineers holding actual defensive positions. Brief, sharp firefights that gave every probe exactly the resistance a defended sector was supposed to offer. German artillery observers, working off aerial photographs, saw rows of vehicle shapes tucked convincingly into the terrain. Listening posts picked up engine noise all through the night and radio traffic that behaved in every measurable way like a real division talking to itself. Nobody pushed hard enough to find the truth. And that was the whole point. Because if anyone had pushed just a little harder, the entire operation could have come apart in minutes. There's a strange, uncomfortable detail buried in how well this worked. The better the illusion looked, the more German shells it attracted. Soldiers who'd spent the war designing shop windows and painting scenery found themselves ducking real artillery fire, meant for a division that was mostly rubber and plywood. Convincing an enemy you're dangerous, it turns out, doesn't make the danger go away. It just aims it at you. One night, a German patrol pushed closer than any before it, close enough that a careful look at the wrong angle, in the wrong light, might have shown a tank that wasn't sitting quite right, or a track pattern the bulldozers had cut a little too clean. The men holding the line that night weren't infantry. They were artists and radio technicians, crouched in real foxholes with real rifles, waiting to see whether the patrol would keep coming. It didn't. It pulled back the way every patrol before it had, convinced, the same way every patrol before it had been convinced, that whatever was waiting in those trees wasn't worth testing any further. Nobody on that patrol would ever know how close. They'd come to unraveling the whole operation with nothing more than a longer look. Every day the illusion held was a day borrowed, against the moment someone finally looked too closely. And every day somehow that moment kept not arriving. By September 22nd it was over. German command never committed the counterattack this sector was built to invite. And in the days it bought, Patton's staff quietly moved the real 6th Armored Division back into position. Actual tanks rolling into the exact tree lines where for a week only rubber ones had stood. When German patrols came through again after that, they finally found what they'd been reporting all along. Except now it was true. There's no official report crediting these men with stopping a German offensive, because the entire point of what they did was that the offensive never happened. Nothing to defeat, no battle to win, just a threat that quietly decided on its own not to test a line that was never as strong as it looked and never as weak as it actually was. For 1 week in Luxembourg, a little over 1,000 men, most of them painters, sound engineers, and set designers who'd never expected to fire a weapon at all, convinced an entire German army that Patton's line had no gap to exploit. It never did. Not because the line was strong, because they made absolutely certain the enemy believed it was.